Hi there, it's Paulie here. With Mr. Snoots. Yay! So, I found an exciting set of miniatures rules for everybody. So, now, I've long been a proponent of 6mm miniatures. They give a fantastic look. In fact, the first big games campaign I was ever in was a Malburian period 6mm, run by my good old friend Greg Savanos, who's actually on the playtest team for a lot of Sam Mustafa's rules. So, hi Greg if you're watching, and hi Sam, who is also a watcher. But I found some rules for 2mm. 2mm, you're crazy, they say. No. This is a really interesting scale. I will put up some pictures of 2mm troops through here. However, the back of the rules give you an idea of how this gives you this helicopter view of the battlefield. Now, these rules, strength and honor, really good rules, and it's doing something really good. These are actually are exciting set of rules. I really want to get into playing them, and they have many strengths as a set of rules, which we're going to go over with, and then we'll go over the strength of 2mm. Strength and honor. So this is designed to be a very accessible game that gives a feeling for actually running an army. Too many miniatures board games are almost skirmishers, and they concentrate on minor changes in equipment. You're doing the small stuff. You're doing the stuff that, guys running a few dozen people on the ground really worry about. This is the big picture. What do your troops do? Now, the thing is played on a table which is divided into square sectors. You can buy tablecloths which have these sectors. I've got a few here, and they're good. They're subtle. It doesn't wreck the terrain. These are designed for smaller scale troops. You can do it with 6, but you can see very specifically they're keen on the 2mm, and I can see why. A unit in the game is essentially a base about the size, think of it like a playing card, ordinary like poker card. That's about the size of one of your units. A unit under these rules is big. It's quite a few thousand men, so it's in Roman terms, and these rules are designed for the early sort of Imperial Roman period. So they go through like Caesar's Gallic Wars period, so through the 60-50 BC, through the Roman Civil War things, to the end of, say, the early Principate. So they go from about, let us say, 100 BC to 200 AD. So all the main Roman civil wars, invasion of Britain, fighting the Gauls, fighting the Parthians, this sort of thing is what it's done for. They are adaptable. We can look at that in a moment. But this means that one unit on the board, that's a legion. That's one legion. It's about, what's a legion? 8,000 guys. So that's the scale we're looking at here. And you will have, half a dozen to maybe a dozen pieces on the tabletop, tops. So, big picture. Now, what we have to start off with is your general and your army will give you some points which are used on your little command board. You get a little sheet that you put out. You've got points and you can distribute them between certain factors. And that's the pre-planning you're doing for your army. You can put these points into managing attack, defense, stratagems, and you also get some generalship points on the side. The points that you've put into attack, they are used for things like increasing or re-rolling attack dice, re-rolling dice to activate units that are actively trying to attack, that sort of thing. The defense dice are used for, obviously, your defenses. They're used for re-rolling defensive combats, for re-rolling attempts to rally troops and stand troops. You can trash them in to make your guys stay in the field longer, to hold the line longer. The strategy section, those can be burned to do strategies before the game, such as flank attacks, ambushes, and these sorts of things. There's lots of things like that you can do. You can also use them in the game to do things like push units into extra movement, to do flanking, to do maneuvers, these sorts of things. You can, as an emergency, trash in several points from 3 points from one category for 1 point in another category. You can do that at any time if you feel you've misplanned, but obviously that's going to cost you. You also have generalship points, which you can use kind of on the fly for different things as well. But you have to be an exceptional general to have many of them, but everyone does get some. So that pre-planning is important. Are you playing an offensive game, a defensive game? Are you planning on maneuver? Are you just going straight at them? This, having your plan of battle before the day of battle is important. I love this. Nice, fairly simple system for laying out terrain. You take it in turns, and what you do is essentially each of these sectors, you choose one, and then you roll 2 dice on a little chart, and it depends on the sort of landscape you're in. Is it desert? Is it German forest? Is it the hills of ancient Britain? Whatever, and it gives you a type of terrain that can be there, or some choices. The player then decides where to place these. They can put them in that square, or they can kind of, if it's some things like hills or woods or whatever, they can make them contiguous with another feature that's in the next thing, so that if you get 2 sets of woods, you can touch them together and it makes a forest as you link more of them together. Forest is denser than woods. It's got denser underbrush. It's more impenetrable to cavalry and things like that. So, you have some terrain building choices there. But again, it's the general flow. We're not too interested in individual huts and villages and streams. Is this an urban area? Is this a forested area? Is this area generally rough going? So you then deploy your troops and off you go. How you play. Now, your troops are rated for things such as their movement activation, their discipline, their combat, and so on, obviously. Now, if you activate a unit, one player starts moving. It's their turn. What they do is they nominate a unit and they attempt to do an activation. You can activate it to try and move. You can activate it to try and maneuver, which is anything other than sort of straightforward movement. You've got to sort of activate it. So if it's going to turn or start going diagonally into other sectors and so on, or do an about turn, it needs to maneuver. Or you can tell it to charge, which is to move forward into melee combat. And you can also activate things to just combat if they're in an adjacent sector with somebody. Now you roll dice. These each have a factor. You have to beat that, or equal or beat that factor on a d6 in order for it to do it. If you make the roll, it does it. If you don't make the roll, if you've got some points on your command board, you can try for a re-roll. But otherwise, if you fail, that is a reversal of fortune. Your turn stops, and it's now the other player's turn. So be careful what you do. So for instance, if you have like Gallic warbands, you'll find they are very good at charging forward to attack the people at their front, and they're quite violent, so they have a very easy combat activation. But their maneuver activation is bloody terrible, because this is a huge mass of guys undrilled and unskilled in, left flank, right flank, etc. So they are harder to make curl around and do things. Leave that for your cavalry. That's what they're for. So again, the uses of the troops are important. You get some troops are skirmishers. You can deploy skirmishers as an entire unit, in which case they are very useful. They can fire at a distance. They're actually quite hard to get rid of because they tend to just move back rather than drop dead. And they're very, very hard to chase out of anything that resembles cover. But they can be wiped out in combat, and if they go, they completely go. They don't have much kind of stick-to-itiveness. But what you can do is you can break those skirmisher units up before the battle begins into skirmish lines and lines of reinforcement. I think a unit of skirmishers you can break up into, I think, 2 units. But you can also break up light chariots into skirmish lines, and thank you, elephants are skirmish lines. Yes, elephant skirmish lines were a major form of deployment. And again, you can only see that at this scale. Any given unit can have 1 skirmish line attached to it in the front, and this gives it a bonus in combat. You can also have a reserve line of skirmishers, up to 3 reserve lines of skirmishers attached. You put them at the back. If you take casualties on the lead line of skirmishers, if they get killed, you can replace them with the reserve lines. There's some little minor things there. So most skirmishers, the skirmishers can, of course, shoot. The light chariot skirmishers actually add to the discipline of the units that they're attached to, because these are nobles and so on, and they lift everyone up. The boss is present. So ancient British warband with an attached skirmish line of chariots can be quite dangerous, because they get the combat bonus from the chariots, because you've got these guys racing out, showering javelins on people, and then once the unit engages, they're doing flank attacks and spoiling attacks and all this sort of stuff, you know, boom, 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 boom. But also, you know, because these are the mighty upper warrior caste and so on, these guys are also present as leaders on the ground, helping the unit, you know, get rid of all these Italian blighters who've suddenly come turning up on old Blighty. But yeah, so the elephant skirmish lines, again, are quite dangerous because they can cause a lot of disruption in the enemy. You can also cause disruption on yourself. Sometimes if you roll a disaster result while you're using them, they can essentially stampede back. It's rare, but it did happen historically. It happens here. And so that can send your own units kind of, you know, staggering back in disorder. But you know, the elephant skirmish lines are a thing, and they're ferocious. You know, it's like, so if you're playing a, well, this is slightly later than the Hannibal period, but you know, you can see how that's going to work. Oh, I've got fairly so-so Spanish infantry. Yeah, but I got an elephant skirmish line out the front. Welcome to 2-dimensionality, everyone. You can also, of course, deploy elephants as, you know, solid units, and they make fantastic shock troops. So units have set tags that you can attach to them. So pike units have very specific rules. They tend to grind forward. They're quite brutal as they grind forward, but they're very susceptible to anything like rough terrain or flank attacks and so forth. And you can see as you put them up against Legion, they're about a match for a Legion, but the Legion is more flexible. So you can see why pikes went out of fashion. You know, they're great for open plains if you've got well-protected flanks, but, you know, for anything like campaigning outside of those sorts of areas, take the Legion every time. Cataphracts and so on. Cataphracts, the heavy armour, can make some damage bounce. They're fairly good combat troops. Things like Parthian horse archers and so on, they can fire at range rather than having to go to melee. And you get some light cavalry have like Parthian shot ability, where they can fire all around themselves instead of simply sort of in a 45-degree fan to their front. There are different ranges for different types of missile-equipped troops. So the bowmen can usually fire a couple of sectors away from themselves, and javelineers and so on, usually just attacking the adjacent sector, this sort of thing. But there's lots of things there that can tag units as being drilled. So, you know, they can re-roll maneuver things, battle-hardened. So they change or ignore some of the results in the battles, and a slew of these, pages of these. So you can make virtually anything you want with these simple tags. I really like it, really like it. And if you're playing a campaign game or playing a specific scenario, wherever, you can tag some units as being veteran and highly skilled, or some having shaky morale. You can do all that. Wonderful. So you can play like Roman Civil War things. Oh, here's Mark Antony's legions. They're looking a bit shaky today. You know, here's this guys. They've got one really good veteran legion in the middle. Look at these guys. These are really quite tough. Ooh, but they're a little bit fragile because they've taken a lot of casualties. Oh, okay. So yeah. So these simple tools allow you to build very flexible things. The combats, you have a attack value. If it's a missile unit, it's got different missile and kind of melee values. But this is very simply done. There are some factors which can add or subtract to a unit's combat value. Being uphill, attacking someone who is holding terrain that is not good for you, like cavalry trying to attack people in rough terrain. These sorts of things. And all you do is at the end, there's only going to be like one or two factors. And you then say, does one of you have a higher combat factor than the other? There is a combat chart that you roll on, and it's a d6 roll, and it can be because you've activated your troop to attack. So it's done on a 1 is basically you are repulsed, and that's bad things, and on a 6 crunch you've done bad things to the enemy, and they are going to recoil away. But if you have the higher battle total, you will roll twice and decide which result you are going to use in preference. And then there's a little write-up for each things, what they mean. It does vary a little bit depending on the troops. So normally they will say something like, if you've done a repulse, okay, you must recoil back to the thing that you've come from. You are now disordered, which means someone gets a bonus if they attack you in combat, and your army has a setback. Some of these things can go really, really badly. Some of the attacks go very badly. They will tell you have to make a discipline roll or whatever, and it could be that that unit then routes and starts to move, away from the battle. You can try and reform them and so on, but these things have a further layer of calamity. You have setbacks, which is when something didn't happen. You did an attack and it failed. Someone attacked you and they forced you to recoil. So the setbacks, the really bad versions of these that turn up are disasters. Now, whenever you get a setback, there's a deck of cards that you pull from. Specific cards, they're in the back of the book, but they're also on the website, so you can just print them out and make them. These are kept face down. You pull these out and you have your pile of setback cards. Disaster cards is a separate deck. The setback cards, I think about a third of them are blank, and the rest are like 1 or 2 point values. I'll tell you what that means in a sec. The disaster cards, they tend to be like 3, 4, 5 point values, and I don't think there's any blank ones. I think the equivalent of blank ones is like your 1 or 2 points. But you accumulate these cards. You can spend some of your generalship points and so on to try and discard these, to try and get them down. But at any point during the game, a side may spend one of its activations to say, homunculus est. That means your opponent now has to turn over their collection of setback and disaster cards and count up the value. You have a breakpoint for your army that you've calculated at the start of the game. It comes off the highest discipline of any unit in your army. So if you've got a bunch of trash, it can be useful to have the Royal Guard there, because they will increase the chance of increase your army's breakpoint, basically. So it comes off the highest discipline of the best unit you've got at the start, and the strength of your army at the start. If the disaster plus setback cards are higher than that number, that's it. Woe is me, the omens are against us, and the army will retire. However, if the army has had a value that is lower than its breakpoint, and the other guy's called homunculus est, you have failed to call homunculus est. So basically, you've drawn sword. Yeah, they're breaking, boys, hit them! And everyone surges forward and finds that's not so. They've still got some fight in them, sir. What happens then is that's actually cost you. Your opponent gets to discard their highest value card from their disaster and setback piles. So be careful when you call it. You've just made things worse for yourself if you call it wrong. So it's a really nice little thing, that. And I think it's a setback, a reversal of fortune if you decide to declare that and it fails as well. So, very simple little mechanisms there that give you such an amazing battle. Cavalry obviously have longer moves than other people, as in, they tend to go 2 squares rather than 1, these sorts of things. That lovely array of special tags that you can put on units means you can make anything. So, and some of these things also allow different types of units to work together. So for instance, for those of us who are up on the ancients thing, German light cavalry, you may attach light infantry skirmishers to them as a skirmish line. In many other cases, cavalry can only have cavalry skirmishers as a skirmish line because they can't keep up. Ancient Germans, they would actually kind of, light infantry would hop on the back of the horses and ride with them and then deploy as a skirmish line in battle and kind of intermingle with the cavalry fight, kind of throwing javelins and stabbing people with spears and so on. They were famous for it, etc. So you've got these little things that you can do. So for instance, Parthians, when you look at it, the archers are what's actually tough. They cost, there's a points value attached to different troops and things. Parthian horse archers cost more than the cataphracts. And when you look at it, yeah, the cataphracts have really only got kind of one use. They don't maneuver very well. They do shrug off some, they do have a chance of shrugging off some damage, but they're not tougher than legionaries, you know, kind of sort of the equivalent of legionaries. It's just they can shrug off some damage. Whereas the horse archers are fast and they maneuver well and they shoot and they do have a melee ability. So yeah, I'm going to swarm and I'm going to try and shower damage down on people, and then once they're disordered and once they're starting to rout, well, the cataphracts may not even reach here. I can close in and finish this myself. You know, so you've got these kind of things going on. They have an extensive set of army lists at the back. Mr. Snoots enjoyed it. Yes, he did. And so did this guy. So they've got the Marian legions. They've got, you know, the late Republican sort of legions. They've got early kind of Augustinian and Roman Civil War stuff. They've got the later Hadrianic style legions. And you can see there's a changing character in them. You can see not just from the composition of troops. It's sort of interesting too. The Roman auxiliaries are just really cheap-ass legionaries. They are not guys designed for fighting in rough terrain at all. The legions can operate in rough terrain. They all can. They're infantry. They're allowed. They adapt. They're allowed not to walk side, you know, locked shield to shield. You know, no one in the past was stupid. They're just really a cheaper legionary because the legionaries themselves have really high discipline and so on. These are citizens, there's just not that many of them. So yeah, you can see they're thickening out the line with auxiliaries. These are the guys you wouldn't really choose to be your first line. But, you know, more auxiliary cavalry start appearing and so on. You've got Pontic, which is sort of a bit of a survivor from the past. So it's still got pike units and it's still got peltasts and, you know, leftover kind of Macedonian Greek things mingled with, you know, some cataphracts and so on from Armenia. You've got Armenians in there, you've got Parthians in there. The Pontic style list can also be used for things like Cleopatran style armies, if you are playing, you know, that. These are very typical Macedonian successor armies from the period. They've got Gauls, they've got Britons, they've got our old friends, the Dacians, who are usually kind of, in many ways, they're, in some other systems, the Dacians are like, almost like a Rolls-Royce warband army. In this you can see, yeah, they're interesting, but the stuff that appears so heavily on other smaller scales, where, oh, I've got warbands, but I've got all of these guys, the, you know, allied cataphracts from the Black Sea. It's like, well, no, in a bigger battle, this is just a tiny unit. You've got one patch of cataphracts or something. You've got to live with the tribes. These are your actual main guys. Great. But, you know, they're good warband. But on the other hand, British warbands, if you attach those chariots to them, and the difference between having like closed order and open order warbands, you can sort of see it's like, you'll get the closed order kind of warbands like some of the Germans and some of the Gauls. Yeah, they've got a bit of stick-to-itiveness to them. But the open order ones like the many of the Britons, they tend to be ferocious, which gives them a bonus when they charge. And they're moving through rough terrain way better. It's like, yeah, in a big scale thing, screw putting those guys in close order. I want these guys to move like a bat out of hell and strike like furies. There's Numidians, so, you know, elephants, etc. And of course there are elephants in the Roman Civil War armies as well. So it's a good selection there. The First Ancients sort of group that I was really playing in, we rolled random dice back in DBM days. And we said we're going to choose armies from vaguely around the Mediterranean area. We're not going full Chinese or whatever on this. And we rolled random dice for the years. It's good. It is 83 AD. You may take armies from there. That's what this suits. But with those tools that they've handed to you, you could use these for anything. I can see how you would do hoplites because the tags to create those are all there. You can see how you would do ancient Egyptian and Hittite. We've got rules in here for heavy chariots, for light chariots, for chariot skirmish lines, for skirmishers. It's all in there. If you really wanted to play Byzantines versus Sassanid Persians and Avars and Carolingians, if you wanted to shift it through to that more Dark Ages period, yeah, it's all in there. Just choose the tags. What are my Sassanid Savaran? Okay, well, they're not like the cataphract we've got here, but they are armoured, so I'm going to give them an armour bonus. They are quite manoeuvrable. They can shoot. They're pretty fair in combat. All right. They can have some cataphracts with them. You can see those guys move less well. They're nowhere near as manoeuvrable. They've got a bit more grind forward on them. They've got more stay puttishness. Yep, okay. I've got my nomad horse archers. I need my peasant spear. Well, that's fine. I can do that. Crap spear is easy to do. Boom, there we go. So you can make these army lists yourself. So, don't be put off by the fact that the rules were initially done for this narrower period. But I like things kept within a period where things that could have faced each other do face each other, because that's what they're actually adapted for. There's a campaign system in this, and there's an experience system in this so that units can actually gain extra tags as they go on, so they can start to be a bit tougher. You can start saying this legion is ferocious. This legion has become disciplined. But as they have setbacks, they can also get things. This legion's become a bit indisciplined. This legion is ferocious and indisciplined. Yeah, they've been stationed out east a bit too long. They're butchers, but they're all drunk as skunks. So you can make that. So this is the flavour. Now, the other really good thing about these rules is the 2 mil. So the rules themselves, they have adverts from Coral Miniatures in them. This is a 2 mil manufacturer. And they've got many beautiful pictures of those Coral Miniatures in use. However, Irregular Miniatures has made 2 mil for about 30 years, so this is not a new thing. You can also find some spectacular little things on YouTube where people are just making their own. Now, there are some 3D print STI files that you can get for these things, but some people were making these things literally out of matchsticks that they're carving. They're just like, because the idea is it's an impression what you're getting. So the irregular miniatures are actually quite detailed. Some of the STI files I've seen for the pike blocks are really quite good, because they've got like a layer that you can put over that has like pikes sloped forward going through to the guys at the front that are pasting forward. So you do get this amazing kind of forest spears look to the whole thing. Romans in checkerboard and everything look great. So there's many different ways of doing it, but the key to all this is it costs, in the words of my Australian people, sweet bugger all. You can make an army for very little outlay, and painting them is amazing. They actually look great. They really do. It gives you this amazing impression. Take a look at some of the YouTube videos. I've seen some interesting things that you don't often see. So one guy was actually painting up his bases and putting some flock and so on them, and then he's gluing the troops down on them after that, which I actually like, because having done this for like 40 odd years, sometimes it looks a bit artificial the way the troops are surrounded by terrain but not kind of on it. Take some inspiration from the Bacchus Miniatures 6mm site, because they're quite good at doing bases that have some terrain on them. I love their American Civil War 6mm photos. You can see they've actually got like skirmish lines But these guys are behind like logs. They've just taken sticks and whatever, made logs, and they've got some trees and so on the bases. It makes it just more interesting, more of a tableau. And the tableau is the thing. That's what you're going to get from this. These 2 mil armies are going to look like armies. Do you remember seeing the old Spartacus movie with the Romans moving forward and their checkerboards, and you just got these generals in the foreground talking, and then you got this on the hills behind them, because they had thousands of extras. And then, you know, as they get into combat, it's like, yeah, that's what you're getting from these rules. That's the feel of these. So the 2 mil stuff is great to play with, and you can make so many different armies and so many different things for no outlay. It's not costing you a ton. It's not costing you much in the way of time, and the time's kind of fun. Effectively, what you're doing is you're blackwashing these things, and then you're highlighting. So you're taking often a silver Sharpie or something, and that you're just dotting that across the top. That's your helmets. If these are hoplites or, you know, Romans with shields, all right, what do I want my shields to be with this unit? These guys are going to be red. I want this legion to be red. Now, there's some other cute little bits, by the way, kind of subunit reinforcements and so on that you can do, which I quite like. So you can nominate some special things to attach to some units. So you can have a cavalry reserve attached to a unit. It's not big enough to be a unit on the table, but this unit does have a cavalry unit attached, like many legions did. They had a cavalry unit as part of the legion. You can have some units that have an elite element within them. Again, like some legions, or many legions, particularly in the early Principate, have a double strength first cohort. You can tag something that this has a double strength, you know, cohort, or has a Praetorian cohort attached to it to stiffen it more. What's another one they've got? They've basically got a Forlorn Hope equivalent that you can do. You can have these kind of almost sacrificial charging units designed to bust up the enemies. They are specifically mentioning in that earlier Roman units that would do it. However, this is a pretty good thing to have for things like Arab conquest armies, which were somewhat feared for these spoiling attack groups that would kind of bust enemy lines before the main lines hit. And many nomad groups and so on had very similar kind of tactics. So again, you can mess with these things by attaching these kind of little tags again to units. So flexible. So look, I think this is a terrific piece of work. It's you can find this on the Two Fat Lardies website, the British website. It's done through them. That's where I got these. And on that website there are other resources. So there's the cards, and there's scenarios, many scenarios. The book, of course, has many scenarios in it. And so anyway, look, these rules actually excited me. I haven't seen much that's exciting in miniatures. I'm trying to write stuff that's exciting in miniatures, but I haven't seen much exciting in miniatures lately. This excites me. Strengths of it, it gives you this magnificent panoramic game. It's got actual generalship in it where you're managing your pre-plan. You're going to have to plan. You're going to have to make your game plan before you set out. The unpredictability of telling when the other guy's on the verge of collapsing, as opposed to so many other systems where you can just lean over and say, oh yeah, if I get one more unit this turn, the game's over. No. It's way more unpredictable, way more fog of war-y, but that's done so simply. And risk-reward, there's a risk in doing it. So do it when you're certain. So it's a really nice piece of work. You're not counting up dozens of factors. Does my unit have a higher combat strength than yours? Yeah. Then I have the advantage, so I'm rolling 2 dice and taking the best. That sort of thing. Beautiful piece of work. Beautiful piece of work. And the 2 mil is actually exciting, because the other thing I think you might notice is the actual formations show. So your legion, you can have it there in triple S's, you know, in its 3 lines, or in 2 lines. And there are rules for whether you're going to deploy legions as this. You can also thin them out entirely and split one legion, which is normally 1 unit, into 2 weaker ones. But if you're facing horse archers and you need to spread out, that can be a great idea. But, you know, your horse archer groups can look like horse archer groups. You've got the big reserve of guys, and then you've got the streams of fast-moving horse archers coming out to do firing passes past the enemy. Javelin armed cavalry in Cantabrian circles, again with a reserve unit back, you know, with the next group galloping out to replace the guys circling, firing as they get to the close point of the enemy. The war bands look like a giant kind of raggedy mass. Instead of these inexplicably beautifully British drill-dressed units that you'd always get in DBM, where for some reason the barbarian horde is really, really interested in being at perfect right angles to everybody. It's got the feel, and that's where this triumphs. It gives you both the visual feel from the scale, and it gives you the battle management feel and the risk-reward feel and the fog of war feel that's been missing from so many other games. I think it's a really good game. Highly recommend it. Mr. Snoots recommends it because, all right, well, largely because the elephant skirmish lines, but he actually enjoys it. This guy just likes the mayhem. Meh. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this. Strength and Honor, which is in many ways an unfortunate title because it does sound a bit like a holiday magazine for the Hitlerjugend, but what the hell? A damn fine piece of work. Raising a glass here to the designer, Mark Backhouse. You, sir, are a gentleman and a scholar. I'll see you guys around the table someday, I hope. Look after yourselves, keep gaming, and cheers, everybody. Bye. You want to push the button? He wants to push the button.